Alright, hello everyone. In another video, we talked about looking for entry points, which is assessing the round that came before you and then making a strategic decision to anchor your extension on a particular line of attack to make your entrance most impactful. There's also another way to think about this concept, and instead of doing it at the start of your speech or before your arguments, you would do this at the end of your analysis. And in my opinion, this is the critical skill that whips should train the most when they are attempting to prove the relevance of their team's contribution to the round. So let's say the motion was, this House would decide impeachment trials solely through a popular vote, and you are in closing opposition. Your opening argues that the alternative of entrusting impeachment to the legislative sector is likely to be a corrupt and unrepresentative process. They will act in the interest of their respective political parties, so the outcome of any impeachment trial will likely be illegitimate, and it will also not necessarily follow due process. Instead, opening government argues that the public is in the best position to decide on an impeachment trial because they were the ones who voted this official in the first place, so it's only right that they exercise the democratic power to take them out. Opening opposition then responds by saying that direct democracy may also not be legitimate, as the public is exposed to multiple biases and sentiments of popularity more, and thus they won't follow due process. In fact, as they argue, even politicians who want to restore the integrity and reputation of their political party are likely to act in a professional manner to deal with these cases better, which mitigates many of the potential abuses of power, as impeachment trials also cause some level of infighting within these parties. After all, as opening opposition argues, this is a more approximate version of the spirit of democracy, as the public entrusted their votes to these other politicians as well. Then, to add even more complexity to this debate, closing government enters the picture by saying the following: the process of a popular vote makes an impeachment trial more legitimate and participatory, as it involves a very long-lasting campaign that will be hyperfixated on the impeachment trial. This means that the odds are inherently stacked against the person being put on trial, so if the public still wills it to be that this individual stays in power, then this is the truest democratic will that they have expressed. On the other hand, closing government argues further that political parties that attempt to preserve their reputation will conceal information from the public, making the impeachment process itself less and less transparent because they are in control of how it is run. Now, if you notice, these are very good responses to the opening half, and they change the mechanisms that are talked about in the debate. If you were in closing opposition, you would rightly notice that there's a lot of multiple rich engagements going on at the same time, even with just the material that we've been presented with. And this is natural and expected all the time, as I always say that a single argument can do multiple things. Having observed the opening half, you may have constructed an argument at closing opposition that states that subjecting the impeachment process to a popular vote will not only subject it to a biased population that may be swayed by personality politics, like what opening op says, but you want to go further and explain that this leads to significant media speculation, sensationalization, and even conspiracy theories on social media that may polarize the public even more as a consequence. So the power you are handing over to the public is necessarily excessive in this instance, as it may weaken future trust on democratic systems by enabling authoritarian and populist leaders to evade any legitimate investigation on the things that they do while they are in power. But the argument itself is not really what I want to focus on here. What I want to focus on instead is how you connect this simple point with other engagements in the round. So for this debate, you can say that opening government's defense of the public is not legitimate, as their interests are not only skewed, but they are actively manipulated and polarized further as a consequence of having the discourse created from this impeachment trial while this individual has power. Furthermore, this argument implicitly expands on opening opposition's defense on political parties and politicians by establishing that they are relatively less resistant to populism and polarization precisely because of their interest to stay in power. And lastly, in addressing closing government's push on an inherently negative context of the media, your extension contests this directly by explaining that it is the forces of public discourse that will muddle up this information and lead to less legitimacy on the trial process, as opposed to political leaders that are relatively less resistant to being swayed by public sentiment due to the bases that they are loyal to. Again, this doesn't make your argument immediately winning because you can still be contested on those various characterizations, but pointing out these pathways from one single argument on media speculation and the public distrust this creates is still a significant huge step than just throwing an argument out there and hoping that it'll get accepted. So the technique is you want to connect your argument with other existing engagements and paths to winning that other teams are attempting in the round, and use that as your leverage point to prove the relevance of your argument and extension. Alright, that should be it for today's video. Thanks for watching and have a great day.